Okay, so here we are in a new project. It's 1920 1080, 24 frames a second, and I've set the duration to 6 seconds this time. And you'll notice that I've imported all of our pre-renders from our earlier project. My first step is going to be to take everything apart from the main wipe and set the blend mode to screen. Then I'll take everything apart from circuit 1 and turn it off. Next I'm going to make a camera, so that's Alt Command C, and I'll switch to 3D. F1 for its transform. Let's set an X rotation of 45 degrees and a Z position of 500. And let's just turn off those wretched 3D overlays which I find very confusing. So that's Alt Command /. So now we've got our grid writing on like that. Let's add a behavior to the camera, Command 2, behaviors, basic motion, throw, apply that. F2 for its controls, to open the velocity, and set a Y value of 100. Let's come to the end of the timeline, F1 for the camera properties, and set that to 0. Like so. Let's now turn on circuit 2, and let's come to its Z position and set that to -1000. And its Y position, also set that to 1000. Actually, let's go for 1500, just to be a bit more interesting. So it's, and we're getting a nice bit of parallax on that. Okay, let's also rotate it through 180 degrees on Y, and that'll make it right on from the opposite direction to the top layer. So now turn on circuit 3 and set its Z position to -2000. And let's also set its Y position to 1500. What I'm going to do in this instance is rotate it through 90 degrees on Z, so it writes up from the bottom, like that. And I'm also going to duplicate it, Command D. One copy I'm going to move to -960 on X, and the other copy I'm going to move to +960 on X. And now I've got two side by side. Just adds a bit more complexity to that. Let's now make a new group at the top of those circuits, Command-Shift-N. Let's select all the circuits and move them into that new group. Command-2 to come to the library, filters, color correction. I'm going to add a levels to that group. F3 for the inspector. I'm going to select the blue channel and just drag it down a bit, somewhere like that. And also the green channel, also drag down the white value a little bit, just so we get slightly cyan-y blue. So that's my grids sorted out. Let's turn our attention to the boxes, turn that layer on. What I'm going to do is set its Z position to -500, so it's just sitting a little bit behind everything, and just drag up on Y. Let's go for 1000 on Y. So we're seeing it poke out at the top there. Let's duplicate our boxes. F1 again. I want to rotate it so it's sitting on its edge. So I'll rotate it through 90 degrees on Y. And then I'll move it -1000 on X. And now it's sitting over there. Let's zero out that Z position. And maybe just adjust that Y position to about 750, something like that. And let's take that latest boxes, Command D to duplicate it, and set its Y position to 1000. You can see we're starting to build up this sort of cityscape of boxes and grids. Let's make a new group just above boxes, Command-Shift-N. Let's take those 3 boxes, drag them inside there. Let's take that levels from our circuit group, drag it into the boxes group. Let's reset it. Come to the green channel and let's just make that green like that by dragging down on the white value. Let's tidy things up by calling that one boxes and this one circuits. And we can close those two up. Let's turn on lines. Let's maybe just reduce the opacity down to 50%. And I quite like what that one's doing just where it is. So I'm going to duplicate it, Command D, and I'm also going to do that rotation of 90 degrees on Y, but I also want to change its orientation on Z, so 90 degrees on Z as well. And then I'll move it to minus 960 on X. Actually, let's make that minus 750, so it's in a little bit. And duplicate it, Command D, move the duplicate to plus 750. We've got it on the other side. And our final step is to turn on our waves. It's because it's a PNG, it's come in, it's scaled itself when it's come in. So let's reset the entire transform. Let's set the X scale to 50 and the Y scale to 200. And let's set the opacity to 10. I'm just going to move that over. Let's see, what do we choose? Something like minus 960 on X, duplicate it, plus 960 on X, so we've got a symmetrical result. So there we go, that's our cityscape essentially built. It's looking a right old mess at the moment, but that's because we haven't yet added any lighting, so that's going to be the next step. Okay, so let's add our first light. So that's Command-Shift-L to add a light. Let's set its fall off to 15 and its fall off start to 500. And now let's duplicate that, Command-D, and let's call it light middle. F1 for its transform. Let's set its position to minus 750. And let's now hunt around a bit on Y till we find something that we like for it to light up. So there we go. Quite like it's lighting up that little bit of texture back there. But you know what I'd like to do? What I'd like to do is come back to that texture, circuit board texture, and just move it over so it's a little bit more off to the side. So there we go, that's minus 400 for my circuit 02. Come back to my light here and just move that over as well. So I want this middle light to be lighting up this far left hand corner. And I'm going to duplicate it again, light back, F1 for its position, and I'm going to set that to minus 1750. And again I'm going to sort of hunt around, shifting across on X till I get a bit that I quite like. This is all really going to depend on your own layout and design and how you've generated these grids in the first place. But it's a good idea to have your main light in the center and your two farther lights off to separate sides, because they will really increase the sense of parallax and depth. So here's how that's now looking. Got quite a bit of interest going on there, and a lot of interest in the depth, which is the main thing. But we can increase that a lot, I think, by adding some animation to the lighting. So I'm going to select my first light, come to its own properties, so it's F4. I'm going to select intensity, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to add parameter behavior randomize. Here under amount I'm going to set that to 200. And I'm going to set the apply mode to add and subtract. If we play that, you can see I'm getting that dramatic lighting effect that's really adding to that feeling of kind of electrical activity. What I'm also going to do is come back to the light intensity, and again I'm going to right click on it add parameter behavior, clamp, and I'm going to set the max clamp value to 300, and that's just going to stop it burning out too much at the top end. I could also, if I didn't want it to turn itself all the way off, I could set a minimum clamp value of say 20, and then there would always be just a little bit of light coming from that light source, like so. Let me just copy those two behaviors. So select them both, hold down the Alt or Option key and drag them to the middle. And let's just, down here on the randomize, click on the Random Seed Generate button. A couple of times maybe. And what that will do is it'll offset the timing of that randomize. So the light in the background is now flickering in a separate pattern to the one in the foreground, and that's really going to add a lot more interest. So let's do that one more time. Both of those are selected. We've still got the Alt or Option key held down, and drag that to the light back. And again, let's click on that random seed a few times, and now that's also animating separately from all the rest. So I'm going to take this group here and call it City Elements. Don't know why, some appeals to me. I'm also going to make a new group just above Lines, Command-Shift-N. I'm going to take the lines and the waves and drag them into that group. And I'll grab the levels from the Circuits group and add it to this group, which I'll call Textures, and could make slight adjustment to that if we like. Let's come to the green, add maybe a little bit more green, or maybe even just more blue, I don't know. See what looks good. Yes, I think I prefer a little bit more blue. And what we can also do is come to the City Elements group, Command-2 for the library, Filters, Glow. Let's add a glow to that group, F3 for the inspector. Set the radius all the way down to 2, and let's adjust the threshold to 0.5. And that just adds a little bit more electricity to it. So now we've really completed this aspect of it. You can do what I did in the demo example and add various different cameras and fly around different bits of this scene that you like, and then cut them together. You could also think about, if you're thinking of using this for a title sequence, you could think about adding in images at strategic places and have those flicker on and off, fade on and off, and that could make quite an interesting title sequence. But our next step will be to add a title. So I'm going to make a new group above City Elements, Command-Shift-N, and I'll call it Title. And now in my Favorites menu, I've pre-built this text. Bring it in, Power Text. You can choose any font, but try and keep the line spacing nice and tight like I've done there, so it looks like one unit. Let's look at its style. So the face color is this very pale greeny kind of thing. I've set the opacity of the face to 50%. The outline is enabled, and the color is this 20-30% grey. The opacity of that is 100%, and the width is 10. Okay, the first step is to make a clone of that, so K to make a clone, and let's move it behind by hitting Command /. Let's set the blend mode of this clone to 30%, and let's set the Z position to -10, so it's sitting slightly back from the main instance. And I'm very quickly going to adjust the camera till we've got that text a little bit more centered. So here I am at 4 seconds on the timeline. Select the camera, just going to zero out that Y value and the Z value. That'll pop it into the center of the screen for me. Then I'm going to take this title group, Command-2 for the library. I'm going to add 3 filters. First of all, blur, good old Gaussian blur, add that to that group. Come down to stylize and select edges and apply that above Gaussian blur. And finally come to glow and add that at the top. So let me first of all just turn off glow and let's come into the edges. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can explain something that I need to explain. Let's set the intensity to 15 and let's reduce the mix value down to 90 or even 85. Now if I turn off the Gaussian blur, you'll see the reason for it, and that's that we've got this nasty aliasing happening on all the angled edges. But if I add the Gaussian blur at its default amount, that takes care of it. The edges filter is a great little tool, but it really does make a mess of your edges, and adding a blur just before it will really help you out there. So let's turn the glow back on again, and let's set the radius of that up to 20. And let's zoom out a bit, and now we've got quite a nice looking effect there. Now the problem is, if I move back a bit, our flickering foreground light is periodically turning off and therefore not illuminating our text. So we need to sort that out. So I'm going to take our original light here and I'm going to duplicate it, Command D. First of all, I'm going to come to its position and set the Z position to 400, and the X position I'll set to -250, so it's illuminating this left hand side of the logo. Then F2 for its behaviors. I'm going to set a minimum clamp value of 75, just so it doesn't ever drop down too far. So it's still going to be flickering, but not enough to turn off the illumination of the logo. So I'm going to call that light left, and I'm going to duplicate it, Command D, and call it light right, and F1 for its transform, and let's set the X position of this one to 250 so it illuminates the right hand side of the text. All looking pretty snazzy, but there's one more thing we need to do, and that's to decide how we're going to bring that text on. So the first step is I'm going to make a new group just above my text layer, so Command Shift N. I'm going to call this mask, and I'm going to select the circuit 001, hold down the Alt or Option key and drag it into that mask group. I'm also going to turn off city elements because we don't need to see that for the time being. It's confusing things a bit. Let's close up some of those groups within it so I can find, if you remember, the main wipe render that we created all that while back, and I'm also going to drag that into that mask group, but I actually want it below the circuit, so move that down and I'm going to turn it on. That's all looking terrible mess at the moment, but now we're going to add an image mask to that text layer, so Command Shift M, and we'll drag that mask group that we just created into the mask source well, and we'll set the source channel to luminance. And now if we press play, we've got a pretty interesting reveal going on there. Finally, let's just refine this in a couple of ways. Let's come to the circuit texture, and I'm going to change that blend mode to add. And the nice thing about that is it leaves all that texture in place after the transition has happened, and makes it a little bit more interesting. Let's just change the Y value here to -310, and that I think just gives me a slightly more interesting bit of texture. Right, so let's turn city elements back on again just to see the overall effect. Not looking too bad. There was one thing that I forgot to do when we were making these left and right lights to illuminate the logo, and that was to adjust the fall off value. So let's set the left light fall off to 50% and the same for the right, and that just stops it spilling too much onto the background. So you'll probably want to go in and make a lot of your own refinements to the way this whole scene works, adjust the lighting, adjust the color correction, adjust the timings, but hopefully I've given you enough of an insight into how it's all meant to be put together. So here's my version, which has just taken me a couple of minutes to do. I've adjusted the camera movement a little bit, I've adjusted the lighting. I've also added some depth of field to the camera, which I think really helps to add drama and depth. Apologies for this very long tutorial. Thanks very much indeed for sticking with me, and I hope to see you again for the next one.